Hi, so good evening, Committee Board 11 and the committee members. My name is Joan Huang, a borough planner with HPD Manhattan Planning Division. I'm joined by my colleague, Yanda Siemens, Director of Manhattan Planning, and our development partners. We are here tonight to present the Park 127th Street project bounded by Park Avenue to west, Lexington Avenue to the east, 126th Street to the south, and the 128th Street to the north. So the site contains like 2 privately owned lots and 1 vacant city-owned lot. The proposed project will be 2 new affordable housing developments through the HPD's LOS program, which stands for extremely low and low income affordability programs. So we are seeking a letter of support for this new proposed project. We are at a very early stage, and we are looking forward to your feedback so that the development team can proceed forward with discussion with the HPD about the proposed development plan. So now I will turn the presentation over to our development team.
Joe, you want to kick it off?
Okay, should I start? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for Community Board 11 for making time for us to make the presentation at this meeting. To Angel and Stephen and Jessica and everyone, thank you very much. And thank you for HPD, for Joan and Vianda and everyone that we've been working with on the project. So we've worked with Community Board 11, I guess Angel, obviously, we've known for many years, and others on the board. We just finished up a development project very similar to this one on 107th to 108th Park to Lex, where we just finished building 400 units of primarily low-income housing, and we'll talk about that in a second. This project is fairly similar to that. In that other project that we'll discuss a little more in depth, we combined our land with an HPD lot, just as we would here. Although I guess one of the differences in this project is that this is a much larger site. The land that we're talking about is mostly owned by us. It's about 97% our land, and about 3% is a small HPD lot. But nonetheless, the strategy really is the same. This site that we have currently consists of 2 large 100% project-based Section 8 buildings that we, about 5 or 6 years ago, entered into long-term preservation regulatory agreements with HPD on those buildings, so that they are not only 100% project-based Section 8 low-income buildings, but they've been preserved, I think, for another 30 or 35 years under the HPD agreement. The property also consists of a large parking lot, large open space along the Park Avenue side of the site. Again, the existing buildings are toward Lexington. The development site is primarily toward Park, which is where we would propose for affordable housing development. Before I continue, I just would like to point out that Paul Prue, who is our lead zoning lawyer, is on the call with us. Jaritza Tavares, who is our head of community, political, and tenant relations, is on the call and is part of the team. Christopher Spring, who runs our property management, construction, development business, is on the call. Matt Melody of Curtis and Ginsberg, who is our architects and designers of the project, who we also used on the 107th and Park Avenue project that we recently completed, is also on the call. And we also thank all of the team members from HPD with whom we've been talking about this project for quite some time. And now, looks like we are kind of moving in the right direction on it. So as you see on this first slide, there is quite a bit of open space, quite a bit of land that we would like to develop as affordable housing. And I guess getting back again to the introduction, so HPD is the owner of a small vacant lot on the site. And they are represented by Joan Huang and Vianda Simmons on this call. Tall Prop Equities is us, the people that I mentioned, Jaritza Tavares, Chris Spring, myself, Paul Prue is our zoning lawyer. Curtis and Ginsberg, as I said, was our architects on the 108th and Park project, and they are the architects here. They have a lot of experience in designing affordable housing and residential. Paul Prue of Carter, Ledyard, Milburn, as I said, is our lead zoning lawyer. The Miram Group, Eddie Costell and his firm. I don't know if a representative of Miram is on the call, but they are our political consultants, I guess lobbyists, you could say, but certainly political consultants on our development projects in East Harlem.
Maddie's here from Iran. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's the background of everyone. Tall Prop in terms of what we are. We've been in the Harlem community for about 23 years. We currently own, manage, have in development about 4,000 apartments, the vast majority of which are affordable housing. We were founded in 1997. We have been in the Harlem community since about 1998. The 3,200 units, as I said, are currently units that we own, have developed and manage. And this project, as we'll discuss it more, is about another, another 600 some housing units, which gets up to, I guess, about the 4,000 unit number. Our management company has, I think, a lot of experience in managing and operating affordable housing in both East and West Harlem. As we discuss later on, I think we sent, with the CB11 application, we sent a PowerPoint presentation that discusses many of our affordable housing, new construction, and primarily preservation projects. Here's one. The project that I mentioned, Lexington Gardens 2, is located on a square block that we own from 107 to 108 Park to Lex. We worked with CB11 as our community partners on that project for quite a number of years. We just finished literally construction about 6 or 8 months ago, and we are just finishing up the lease up project now. This property has about 400 affordable units, plus about 35,000 square feet of community facility space for the new flagship headquarters for Northside Educational Services, Northside Center, as well as some other community nonprofits that are in the project as well. And we were very happy with the way that worked out. And we think the residents of the community, I think, are happy with the finished project as well. And our firm, through Chris Spring, manages that project on a daily basis. Now you have a tenant in place rehab project, which this building is actually an original building that is on the Lexington Gardens site before we developed essentially a large parking lot that we owned on that site. We had already this 108 unit project-based Section 8, 100% low-income affordable building on the site, which has also been, as you see, part of this preservation initiative that we've had, where we entered into, in addition to the HUD regulations, entered into a separate 35-year regulatory preservation agreement with HPD, just so there would not be any question that not only are we committing long-term to affordable housing with HUD, but also to the city, to the community, to HPD. This project, 1775 houses, is one of the 2 project-based Section 8 buildings currently existing on the large Park Avenue, 126, 128th Street site that is the subject of this meeting. Again, 100% low-income contract with HUD and 35-year preservation regulatory agreement with HPD. And the other building on the site, AK houses, 157 units, same thing. 35-year long-term preservation with HPD, 100% project-based Section 8 with HUD. Okay, so back to the site. If anyone also wants to jump in from either HPD or Curtis and Ginsburg, I don't want to hog all the speaking time. If I'm leaving anything out or anyone else wants to speak, please speak up. But again, this is the site itself. It consists of two separate sites that are split by the demapped 127th Street, which no longer exists between Park and Lexington Avenue. The reason for building two separate buildings here is that we are not permitted to build on the roadbed of 127th. So we have a north site north of 127th Street, on which we hope to build about 357 units of affordable housing. That would be an Ella building, which would be all low-income units. And the north site, which consists mostly of our property plus the small HPD lot, would be about 205 units, also of Ella low-income units.
Joe, just to jump in real quick, the HPD site is the one you see here in purple. This small one that's along Park Avenue along the Metro North line. That site is about 54 feet deep and about 100 feet wide. So it's a small one. Right now, the only thing on there is a parking lot. There's one small little garage building on there as well, just for some context.
It's vacant and not being used. And Paul, the entire site, aside from the 5,400 square foot HPD lot, the rest of our site is how many square feet roughly?
I don't have that handy at the moment, but it's the HPD site, when you take everything else into context, is 3%, as you mentioned. So the other 97% is the four other lots.
Yeah, it's about so the HPD site's about 5,000 square feet, give or take, and then the rest of the site is about 161,000, roughly.
Okay, got it. Okay. So that's what it looks like. So the U-shaped building and the L-shaped building are the two existing on the kind of the right, and then the other side are the two development sites.
Just
Paul, do you want to talk about the zoning context of the neighborhood?
Yeah. So what you're seeing here is a land use map showing the different land uses in the neighborhood, but you'll recall that this site, at least the portion adjacent to Park Avenue, was part of the East Harlem Corridor's rezoning a couple of years ago, where an M16R9 designation was mapped on our north site, and an M16R10 designation was mapped on the south side. The historic zoning here on Lex is R72, and those existing buildings that we discussed, 1775 and AK houses, were all built pursuant to height factor zoning, and those and that R72 zoning is, it's likely going to require some changes to tweak it to make those existing buildings comply, and to build the new buildings in the open areas that remain.
Okay. This area, as I'm sure you're all familiar, it really is in need of some new ideas, and some new projects, and some really, some changes. It's an area where there's obviously street activity, which is not the most desirable. Just it really is very much in need of community-based, affordable housing-based redevelopment, and that's really what we hope to accomplish with this large site. There are other projects happening in the neighborhood. You have the Durst site across the street on 125th and Park, and others. But this would really just absolutely change, what's happening in the neighborhood now, and provide, not only, very, very desperately needed low-income housing, but also I'm sure some community facility spaces that would also benefit the neighborhood. All right, so Paul, this slide, what shows in white, it shows the two existing buildings on the right, and then kind of in beige or yellow, the two proposed buildings on the left?
Yeah, that's right. You're seeing the commercial base on the south side there. Both buildings would have commercial ground floor uses and would seek to meet the non-residential requirements in the East Harlem corridors special district text. And then there's also an at-grade parking structure that would be included in the building towards the back somewhere. But you'll see there that the East 127th Street corridor is protected by a utility easement, which is what Joe referred to earlier. You know, we can't build in that area because it's protected by you know, historic agreements. So the nice thing about this development is that it'll open up East 127th Street to access, and you know, there's part of the plans you'll see when we come back to you during ULURP eventually will include, you know, some pretty pictures of how that'll look so that, you know, we can better understand the ground floor relationship with the buildings and the street. But, you know, the good news is that it'll be opened up. And then it'll also look to complement the EDC project, which I believe is at 126th and Park underneath the, at the entrance to the MTA station. They've done some, or they're in the process of doing some rehabilitation work there. There was a $5 million proposal that was released right before COVID, I believe. And I'm sure you can tell us more about that, but this will look to complement that and to enliven that intersection at East 127th and Park.
So just more massing diagrams of the two existing buildings and the two proposed new buildings. That's really all that's good.
All very preliminary, you know, as everything is with this presentation. You know, these are just simple massing diagrams and will likely change in 100 different ways between now and the next time we speak to you about this. But, you know, this is the concept here.
Yeah. And, you know, but because of the, you know, the 127th Street being left open and the existing open space, all of which will be redeveloped, yeah, there will be a really wonderful amount of open green space that will be enjoyed both by the residents of the two existing buildings and the residents of the two new buildings.
Something else to just add on to what Joe had mentioned earlier. One of the ideas here is really activating the Park Avenue corridor. I mean, it's instigated by the East Harlem corridors zoning, but you can see the implementation of a commercial or community facility space to really try to enliven and activate that Park Avenue space below the Metro North line. And there's just a very, very early concept rendering of what that sort of thing would be. So with that, we're just going to open up to any questions.
Yes, we'll be taking questions from the committee first and then from any attendees. Thank you all for the presentation. Jessica, I see you have your hand up. Elliot.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Just curious, is the intention that everyone living in the current buildings on site would not be displaced during this process?
Yes, for sure. There's no specific work that has to be done inside of the existing buildings. So even though the site itself would be under development, the two existing buildings would be fully functional as they are.
Thank you.
Jessica, Stephen.
Thank you, Elsie. Thank you to our presenters tonight. Just have a few questions here and one reminder for the committee. You know, the reminder for the committee is that this is, as we have seen in the past, the presentation as we see it may not be fully the same and could also be completely different if the project was to move forward through the ULIP process once it's certified. So these presentations are very fluid, keep an open mind. This is an opportunity for us to really dig in and ensure that the community's interests are in place here. So I have a question for Talprop. Would you be able to advise, I know you mentioned there'll be no displacement, no impact to the existing properties. How would you guys work around the construction impacts, the noise, the access, deliveries, things of that nature?
Well, that again, as you quite correctly point out, Stephen, this is a preliminary presentation, but we would create a very elaborate construction management and property management plan to ensure that there is as minimal as possible disturbance to the existing buildings during the construction process. Fortunately, the only structure on the entire site is a little tiny one-story garage on the HPD lot. There's really no structures of any kind that need to be demoed anywhere else on the site. Obviously, there will be some excavation for foundation work and utility work, but there is no demolition, thank goodness, that really has to go on, except for a very, very small HPD garage. So we would expect to come back to you as this project develops with a much more elaborate construction management, property management, and nuisance and disturbance mitigation strategy for the entire site.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Jason?
How you doing? Thank you for the proposal. Two questions, one for the development team and the other for HPD. To the development team, in your application, you stated that there will not be any community preference for residents of Manhattan Community District 11. Would love for you to elaborate that a little bit out. I see the response. Comply okay, I got a shorthand. Comply with HPD's marketing guidelines, but I would like to hear what would be your efforts in ensuring that our community residents have an opportunity to acquire. And then second to HPD, I would like to hear your take on the developer's proposal. Thank you.
Well, would HPD like to take the lead on the community preference and leasing guidelines? I mean, we obviously will comply fully with the guidelines as we understand them, and we are very open to advice from the community board on those issues.
Yes, good evening, Community Board 11. My name is Vianda Simmons. As stated earlier, I'm the director of the Manhattan Planning Division. So Jason, there will be at this point, the normal 50% Community Board 11 priority for the residents. I'm not sure if you heard differently.
Well, just point of clarification on the application for this presentation, it was marked no. So if that's not the case, I will request that they edit that document. And then, yes, if you could continue with your take on this venture, I would love to hear HPD side. Thank you.
Okay, so apologies for that error, but again, the correction is that there is at this point, there's still the 50% community board preference, and then we have the 7% disability preference, the 5% for mobility impaired, and 2% for visually and or hearing impaired, and then the 5% for municipal employees. So those HPD and HDC marketing guidelines are still in place. And if anyone is interested, there's also a new and improved version of a lot of the marketing guidelines that makes Housing Connect more user-friendly, and that's rolled out in the 2.0 version. And secondly, I think you asked what my impression of the project is. I'm excited actually to present this project to the community board. It's a rarity that we can say that we're providing not only one Ella development, but two Ella developments. And that means, extremely low and low affordable units. And so those are the lowest, those AMI levels cater to the lowest resident population in the city. So that's something that's very exciting. There's a lot that's still to be developed with this project. As mentioned earlier, we're at the very early stages. We've been talking to the development team for a while, just really confirming that the project that they present to CB11 is something that CB11 has been seeking. So for that reason, I'm excited about this new proposed development.
Thank you, Deanna.
Yeah, and I apologize too if that box was mistakenly checked off about no. The answer obviously is yes, and we're very anxious to engage the community and serve the community with this project.
I only request that if we are in support, I mean, obviously the committee has to have a discussion, that we have that document revised prior to the full board. Thank you.
Okay, Paul, you'll handle that?
Yes, and you are correct. The wrong box was checked, but it was specified that we will comply with HPD marketing guidelines. So we will check the right box and turn it around.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Jason, for your vigilant eyes on that. Jessica Morris, you're next.
Thanks, Elsie. And the hope is that it's understood as more than checking the right box. We're looking for the right project and service to the community. A couple questions. Thank you all very much for bringing this to us. It's framed that Talprop is seeking a letter of support to engage discussions of site control with HPD, but you all have been in discussion for quite some time about this potential. Is that correct?
Off and on, yes, Ms. Morris, that is correct. Up until recently, the last 6 months or so, we just weren't sure what the right path forward was on the project. As you may know, HPD's term sheets have changed many times over the recent years, and we just really weren't sure what the best project would be for this site. So it's really only been the last 4 to 6 months, I would say, that we are now in agreement with HPD that the best use of the site is two extremely low and low income allocation Ella buildings, as opposed to various other things that were being considered at that time. So it's now moving together in harmony with HPD has only been the last number of months.
And so this property is governed by the East Harlem Urban Renewal Plan, correct?
Paul?
Well, that's correct, yeah.
Okay. And so we had gone through a lot of making sure that we were on the same page with HPD about that through the fall. I'm sad to see that Candy is not here today, one of our biggest champions of Ella on the board. So it's great to see the sort of volume of units that Talprop is responsible for throughout East Harlem. I have a couple of concerns I just want to bring up. The two little probably very special pieces of a different scale of building that your buildings are going to share a super block with. Lot 170 and 166 along 128th Street. Have you engaged with ownership and let them know their new sort of plans for kind of neighborhood development? We are the community board. I don't know them personally, but I'm sure they would like to know what's coming down the pipeline in their backyard. Just as a sheer measure of scale and context and making sure that we're not inconsiderate of the existing conditions, right?
Yes. That's a very good point, and thank you for bringing that up. I think as soon as we have a little bit more clarity, on what we will be moving forward with and the land use actions and site control on the small HPD piece, we would like to reach out again. We have had conversations off and on. There are, I guess, 3 other fairly small properties on the site. The one at the north end, closest to Lexington, is a small neighborhood mosque. And we have had discussions with them, and we will restart those discussions to make a fuller presentation about what we're proposing once we have a little bit more clarity on that. And thank you for raising that. And the other piece is a small, I'm not sure if it's an auto body shop, but like some kind of a light industrial use, and we will reach out to them as well. And then on the 126th Street side is a school, a nonprofit school, I think called ABC, Association for the Betterment of Children, I think. And we have engaged with them at various points on this project and other issues. We do have a cooperative relationship with them, and we will reach out with them again, because you're right, a project this size certainly will affect not only the community in general in a very positive way, I think, with, as you say, the volume of low-income ELA units that will be created, but also it will have some impact on the existing buildings on the site, and we will be very mindful about providing information and also minimizing impact on those sites.
Okay, and just a follow-up question, and then I just have one more comment or open question that I think will not be resolved right now, but is more of a provocation for you and your team as big stakeholders in East Harlem at large. The question is, are air rights an issue that are in play here with these properties that are not fully built out to their maximum zoning FAR envelopes? I'm not sure who would answer that.
Are you saying, would we acquire air rights from them, you mean, to build our project?
Yes.
We hadn't planned to, because the land use actions that we were contemplating, because our site is so large to begin with, I think we have enough FAR to build, buildings that are reasonably in scale with the surroundings. And so I think we had not contemplated acquiring air rights from those existing smaller properties.
Okay, and then the follow-up is, East Harlem, we have a lot of towers in the park, which means that we have a lot of public space, but we don't have a really great public space plan or culture of maintenance and programming in that public space. So I think there, is a responsibility as an owner to consider what your public space plan will be. And I would, I think to consider the community board as a sort of working partner in trying to steward the next stage of public open space in East Harlem is a big challenge. You are doing great work in working with the kinds of term sheets that Ella responds to, but I think the quality of public space should be no less than the sort of highest possible public good that anywhere in the city might look to advance. So that's a tough challenge, but I hope that you as big stakeholders in East Harlem are up for that challenge.
Well, thank you. I think we are, and I'm glad you raised that. Thank you, because there is a significant amount of open green space here, both in between the 2 existing buildings and within the Park Avenue side, even that will be redeveloped. And when these 2 buildings were built around 1980, obviously Harlem was a different place than it is now. And when you walk into the courtyard between the 2 buildings today, it almost gives you the feeling like, there's all kinds of wrought iron railings up to keep people off the grass, just like plain concrete sidewalks. I mean, it's almost it's almost like they were saying, okay, here's green space, but don't really use it. And that's exactly the opposite of what we'd like to have happen here. And so the open space within the two development sites, plus the open space between the two existing buildings will all be redone pursuant to a master plan. And we really, greatly look forward to presenting some ideas to you on that, so we can have some green space and open space that we can all be proud of and the community can actually get a lot of use out of.
It has to be active in order to be safe. And I think a couple of us went on a tour of the area, walking tour, and there's so much potential there. And so I'm excited to see this, but I think there's lots of caveats, and I would hope that as your process moves forward, that you continue to draw on community partners to provide input and consider those outside the box additional asks that are not what make your bottom line go, but that are what make you good landlords, neighbors, stakeholders in our community. So thank you.
We look forward to having those discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have George, then Andrew, and then we have one hand up in our attendee. So go ahead, George.
Sure. I have two questions, or really one comment. So Paul, you talked about tweaking the R72 to make the buildings comply. Is this, are you going to be seeking a rezoning action, a special permit, or is this just as of right?
No, there will be a ULURP action. Thank you for the question.
Clearly,
Yeah.
but is there going to be a rezoning or a special permit?
Presumably, yes.
Do you know which?
Sorry.
No.
Does HPD want to raise anything on the proposed land use actions? Because we initially had included in this presentation some specific land use actions that we were contemplating, but then we thought, you know what, this is so preliminary, maybe we shouldn't include that. But obviously, it's something we need to get into at some point.
Yeah, I mean, there will be a rezoning as indicated, and we're still in conversations with DCP as to what the land use actions will be. At this stage, again, the zoning district does need to change to a higher zoning district to facilitate the new development, but at this stage, those land use actions haven't been confirmed. Once we, take this, if there's a letter of support that's approved, then the development team is able to present this preliminary proposal we're presenting to our senior management at HPD to allow this project to progress forward. And at that time, we'll be talking more with DCP to really confirm the land use actions. Is a complicated site. So, that involves, legal checks as well. And then once that's more solidified, we'll come before Community Board 11, probably a couple of times at least before we certify to present the land use action in more detail.
Okay. Okay. And then the other comment I have is what you said about 127th Street being reopened. I don't think there's anybody on this committee from 8 years ago, but that's a recommendation from the Park Avenue rezoning that you all adopted 8 years ago, was to reopen 127th Street. It said either mapped or open. I don't know. You're probably not going to map it. I'm imagining that you're just opening it to the public. I would like to there's also another study that was done by WXY and Philip Habib about 5 years ago that looked at the Park Avenue area around the station. And they had a lot of really interesting ideas about traffic flow and how people would move around in that area and uses under the viaduct. Listen, this is a really important site for this area of East Harlem and especially the station area. And, I think, reopening that area and maybe building upon that prior work to help, make this area all it can be, I think would be really helpful. And I can help you try to find that if that's something that you'd be willing to take a look at.
That'd be great, George. I think you know how to get me. Would love to hear from you on that, and we'll make sure that we look at it closely.
Great.
Thank you. Andrew?
I'm going to hold my question for now. I might come back to it.
No problem. Then I see in the attendee, I can't see the full name. It says Tamika M. I can't see your full name. I'm sorry.
Tamika Map.
Map.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Chair, and thank you for such a great presentation. My only questions I have, when I seen the presentation, you said very low for the affordable housing. You know, when people come into our community talking about affordable housing, half of our community members cannot get in to this affordable housing. Can you tell me what that very low AMI is for people to be able to apply to get into the space? And how much of that, out of that AMI, how much is that going to be available at that AMI level? Is that 2 apartments? Is that 5 apartments? Is that 50% of the apartments? Can you give me a rough estimate? I don't like the word very low, because very low is very vague. And you know, you tell me low, and if I refer somebody that makes 15,000 and you talk about 20,000, then kind of displace them. And we're back in that circle all over again of not finding that affordable housing.
Does HPD want to talk about the income ranges that are typical within Ella?
Sure, I can chime in here. This is Joan. So just want to say again that this project actually is still at a very early stage, and all the budget and underwriting still under review by our program. But I do certainly can provide some like a preliminary number here. So there will be like a 2 building here, depends on if there's other program involved. But most of the one of the building is the AMI is going to up to 80. Most of the units going to up to 80% of AMI, and another building will up to all the unit will up to the 110 of the percent of the AMI for the household. But in terms of unit mix and home or like a unit size, we don't have the concrete detail at this point yet. So we definitely, we are still in a discussion with a development team at this point. So we definitely can bring more like a detail once we come back to the community board again.
Well, thank you so much.
I just wanted to add on to that. Thank you, Tamika, for your question. And thank you, Joan, for your responses. I just want to, and you raise a really critical point. When someone says low income or very low, that may mean one thing in someone else's mind and a different thing in another person's mind. So just preliminarily, our Ella term sheet focuses on, going down to respond to the homeless crisis. And I think about 15% of the units, of the total units, will be reserved for formerly homeless. And that is from 0 to 30% of area median income. So that those are the lowest ranges that anyone can have in terms of their income range or what would be required in rent. You also have tiers in 30%, the 30% range. And so some of those numbers at this stage, range from rent that is $460 to $798, and incomes that range from $23,000 to $42,000. And so the 40% tier is also ranges in terms of rent, approximately $631,000 to $1,000. And then the income range for that would be $31,000 to $56,000. So again, the range of income levels and rent levels are at the lowest tiers. And so as Joan mentioned, as the project proceeds forward, those numbers will be solidified, and we'll be able to tell you, how many at each level will be available in the 2 buildings.
The rent levels, as I understand them under Ella, pursuant to the Ella term sheet, these are the lowest rents for a new construction project, other than a homeless shelter. These are the lowest rents for a new construction project that HPD will underwrite and subsidize, and HPD will finance with bonds. That is what we intend to build.
Thank you so much for that. I also wanted to, I'm sorry, I just also wanted to mention to the rest of the people that have questions there, this is preliminary in terms of where they are in the process. There is still a lot that has to be done. I know that if we do take an action, there will be, if we do take an action to approve this letter, it is not approving the project as we are presented it, as it has been presented today. So there will be more presentations with more intricate details about the housing levels, about all of the things that we are asking about now. I think that will come at that time, but this is about them being able to engage with HPD to have the conversation about the land acquisition. So I just wanted to kind of like preface that before we continue on with the questions. Not that these questions can't be asked now, because they definitely should be part of the presentation when that time does come, and those answers should be prepared for us by then. But I just wanted to put that out there. So next is Miriam. I can't see the last names because it doesn't give me enough space on it, so I apologize for that.
No worries. Miriam Chardiwal.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your presentation. So I'm a housing advocate at a nonprofit that's based in the East Harlem community. We're actually on 125th in Lexington. So this project is really interesting. I refer a lot of households, like we do Housing Connect applications. One thing that I wanted to speak about is I heard that 7% of the units, or of the units, will be for people with disabilities. It's not really a question, maybe more of a statement and a conversation to have in the future, near future. So we serve people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. And usually when I see, at least with HPD and in a more like property oriented kind of language, it's usually when you say disability, it's geared towards visual mobility and hearing. But I guess it's just to raise the point of households who have a child, let's say with an intellectual or developmental disability, have certain income barriers. So this is a great support for them. And what steps, if any, are taken to take that into consideration as well? There are certain subsidies like an ISS that work similar to Section 8. Obviously, this property is Section 8 based. So I see that, a possible voucher wouldn't really work with it per se, but, people can openly apply. And that's all.
So thank you for your question. That's something that I'll have to research and bring back to the committee board. But that's a great point, and I'll get back to you with the answer.
Thank you so much.
Apologies, my buttons weren't working. We have one last attendee with a question. I believe it's Terrence Byerson. I don't think he has permission to speak though, Angel. Oh, he may not.
Hello?
Yeah,
Hello?
we hear you.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. How y'all doing? My name is Terrence Byerson, and I'm the Community Relations Manager for Strive. As you may or may not know, Strive is a workforce development organization that's located in Taino Towers on the east side. And we provide our participants with the credentials used in construction, SST cards, flagging, scaffolding, and all that sort, anything needed to work on a construction in New York City. So my question is, will there be any opportunities for participants and also residents of East Harlem if this is approved?
Yes, I think there is community hiring. Aren't there HPD and Paul Prue, if you could help on this too? Aren't there community hiring guidelines and preferences that we will be implementing on this project?
Hey, guys, this is Chris Spring with Tall Prop. Similarly to what we did on Lexington Gardens 2, we would certainly work with CB11 and, get a guideline together for local hires, both for construction jobs and then permanent jobs. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I'll just keep in contact with Angel on that and come to these meetings as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Two important points, all, Mr. Byerson and Tal Prop Equities. Number one, Mr. Byerson, we are collaborating with the Economic Development Committee to take these development presentations that come before land use, as we have to weigh in on the merits of the application on the land use side. And we're pitching them over to economic development. The chair, Marissa Mack, is collaborating with us to ensure that that conversation gets the dedicated time that it deserves, from local hiring to small business participation. So feel free to pop in on the Economic Development Committee's meeting, and feel free to reach out. We'll be continuing this dialogue. And for Tal Prop Equities, just be clear that we do have a CB11 local hiring guideline immortalized in print and part of your land use questionnaire. If you have not reviewed it in detail, please do so. Our statement of district needs for CB11 has a narrative that needs to one day change. It needs to go away. And that's 51% of the 98,000 residents are out of the workforce. So, local hiring is extremely important to this community board, and it will be a conversation we'll continue out in the Economic Development Committee. Thank you very much. All right, it is 7:30. I am going to circle back to our board members, Andrew and Ivy. We're going to wrap up the question portion. Again, this is not approval or denial of the project. This is a letter of support for or against engaging HPD in conversation. So we will have many cracks at this moving forward, whoever decides to engage HPD for this city-owned lot. So I will go to Ivy, followed by Andrew.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you for the presentation. And also, I just want to express appreciation to HPD for addressing some of the lowest income brackets with this project, which we all know is in dire need of housing. I just had a quick comment really in terms of the design of the project. I think one thing that's obviously fantastic is that there's so much affordable housing that's going up in our neighborhood. And that's something we're really happy about. One thing that I have seen as like somewhat of a critic of design and sort of how we approach these projects is that a lot of the new buildings kind of have a sort of use generic materials. And so a lot of the new projects seem to use the same sort of stucco panels and sort of prefabricated construction technologies with exposed P-tacks. And, we're starting to develop almost like a new vocabulary for affordable housing, which, initially, if you have one building that looks like that, it's fine, you don't notice, but it's the same with the sort of low income housing of the 60s. Once you build a whole sea of them, then the sameness starts to create a distinction where you can tell that it's low income versus, any other neighborhoods where there is a healthy kind of differentiation and uniqueness of the different buildings. So I just want to express from my standpoint that it's really important that we use that, more creativity in our design approaches, and specifically with materials, that the materials don't look like the buildings next door. And I want to criticize, for example, like gosh, I always forget the name, but the new project on 111th Street and Park Avenue, the renderings were super happy-go-lucky and exciting to look at, but there is now a blank wall that is basically just stripes of beige and brick red paint that's staring at the train track. And I just think it's real sad to see such a missed opportunity on a huge building facade that is now on Park Avenue, where it's just a really sad facade. I would urge all of you to go see it. I think we need to be really more creative with what we're doing with our building faces and how we're interfacing with the community. great examples of that exist, like the rat mural on Lexington or farther up on Lax on 111th. There are examples of fantastic public art, and I think that we should be thinking proactively about that and not putting up kind of brick walls.
Thank you, Ms. Hume. If I could just say something, that rat mural you're talking about was on our building on 107th and Lex. And it was covered over. It was beautiful. Speaker Viverito at the time asked us to put it up. Really cool. And what we did on that site, which I would urge you to look at, and we'd be very interested in your opinion, the new building, the new 400 units we just finished on the site from 107th to 108th Park to Lex, I think is a very nice looking, like charcoal gray brick with a lot of glass along Park Avenue and also some in Lexington. We'd be interested in your opinion of the appearance of that building. I think it's nice looking. I think the project was well done. But we did have that mural there, which unfortunately is now covered up by the new building.
Right. I think that's a great building. And the only thing that I'm curious about, and I'm just derailing the conversation, is what's going to go in that retail space, that huge double height space on the ground floor. That is one of my favorite new buildings that's gone up. So I applaud you for that. But I think on the other hand, we need to remember that the building, and I can't remember the name, the San Verde, someone on the community board will know the name of the project on 111th and Park, but I think that that's an example for me of something like a missed opportunity. So just
got you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivy. Andrew Padilla. Andrew?
I'm so sorry, my mute button. I kept clicking it, but it wouldn't work. At least I didn't turn into a cat like that litigant yesterday. Hi, everyone. Thank you. I want to thank everyone on the call. There's so many people here today. So just thank you for coming and presenting your best face forward here. I have a couple questions. I wanted to clarify something that I heard earlier, and then I'll get into my questions. So this project is to take place on a privately owned site where 1775 houses currently stands. But you said there's going to be no displacement of these tenants, and there'll be no interior work on this building needed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I have HPD's website up now. And on HPD's website for 1775 houses, also known as 107 East 126th Street. So that's the building around which this project would take place. On my computer right now, I see that this site has 108 open violations on HPD's website. There's 13 Class A violations, 68 Class B violations, and 27 Class C violations, those of course being the most severe. These violations reflect an array of issues, including but not limited to what appear to be extensive mice infestations, water leaks, and mold. These are, as of 2021, these are 2021 violations, not all of the 100, but the ones that I referred to here. To the understanding of the folks on the call, what is the status of these repairs?
How are you, Andrew? This is Chris Spring with Tall Prop. 87 of those violations are completed and awaiting a dismissal inspection by HPD. It's been difficult with COVID, to get timely inspections, and it's also difficult to get into units because of it, and rightly so. But 87 of those violations have been corrected and are awaiting inspection, and we're actively working on the balance, roughly 20, to get those cleared up as well.
Sure. So the mold, water, and mice leaks, it says NOI sent as of 2/5/2021. As of 6 days ago, are the water leaks at the 8th story? Are just taking the water leaks? Are the water leaks taken care of at this time? That was sent 2/5.
They have been.
The water leaks, okay. And then the mice that also sent 2/5, the mice in apartments on the 5th, 6th, 5th floor, are those also taken care of? That's
Some of them are, and some of the units we've actually had an issue getting in. They didn't want the exterminator into the units. So,
Okay.
it's we're actively working on that.
Okay, and then as for the mold condition, those sent 129, that the 9th floor, where is the mold condition? I also see water leaks here, so it appears as though it might be related to that, because mold comes up a bit in some of the prior dismissed complaints. There are mold and water leak issues. Is there a more structural thing here?
No, the building is in good shape, and the roof is only a couple of years old. It's not coming from there. These are generally, instances that happen in the apartment, whether it be a tub is overflowing, which sometimes is human error. Could also, be a P-trap in the sink that's leaking, that leaks to the unit below. And you have to go in and scrape and paint sometimes, replace sheetrock so you don't have mold. But obviously we take these things very seriously. They have built up a little bit, the dismissal portion, due to COVID and some of the unit access, but we are all over this, and we do take this seriously, and we are awaiting the inspection for the 87 violations that have been cleared as of yesterday.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate that. I as a board member and as a tenant advocate and organizer for a number of years, I don't really feel comfortable voting in favor of a letter to support something at this site without clear commitment to amend these violations, and I appreciate your attention to it. It appears as though there's certainly attention here. But certainly, I would feel much more comfortable if I had more of an understanding around the work plan and a commitment to immediately resolve these violations, because a number of them appear to be reoccurring. Thank you.
Yeah, and Andrew,
Thank you very much,
as
Andrew.
we progress down the path here, I think things are opening up for HPD with in terms of inspections, so this number certainly will come down. And then with respect to construction and the impact on the residents of 1775, we'll have a full site protection plan that we'll need to furnish to DOB, but we'll certainly discuss with the community board and give you guys regular updates on our progress.
Right, but as of now, to your understanding, the ones that were sent out 2.5 on the mold and the rats and the water leaks, these are not fully covered. These are not certified by HPD, I understand, but these problems have not all been resolved as of yet.
No, not all of them have. I mean, we're actively working on them, but like I said, there are some, access issues to the actual units. Some of the residents are concerned because of COVID of getting in. So we're working on it. We will get it straightened out. It's just, we do need cooperation.
Sure, I know that, but I mean, for this violation to occur, the tenants would have had to let someone in to verify them from HPD. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, Andrew, thank you very much for the research and information you shared with the committee, the board, and the public. Thank you to CalProp for responding to those questions. Just be clear that anytime we review a development where the developer has existing properties either near, on, or around the community, one of the commitments we seek is to ensure that the tenants that you are currently managing the units for, have a healthy and safe environment to live. So we'll move on to Elsie, and then we will close out questions and move forward vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my question is for HPD.
I'm sorry. Is there any way I can comment on what was just said? My internet went out for a minute. I'm sorry.
If it's relevant to the conversation, Vianda, and if Elsie is okay with pausing her question, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Yes, I will. That's another unit that handles all of those inspections. So I will also investigate the status of what's going on with the inspections, and we'll provide updates as well. The project cannot get through City Council approval without all of the violations being cleared. So I just wanted to stick to those two lines.
Thank you very much, Vianda. Elsie?
Yeah, I guess my question was more about this approval and how committed are we after this approval that this would be the only project for this site. So obviously we still have to look at the proposal and the project, and we would have to approve or deny it. But in the meantime, it means that no one else can give us any proposals for this site if we approve. Is it like an engagement, a marriage? Like, how committed would this approval make Tau Prop to this site for HPD?
Right, so that's a really good question. So just in general, just to back up a little bit, our sites are disposed in a couple of ways. One is through an RFP process. And the second one is this process. When there's a private developer who owns property adjacent to ours, you can create a site authorization process or site control where you're creating the assemblage of privately owned and city-owned land to develop affordable housing. So in those cases, we go before the community board to get a letter of support so that the development teams can proceed with HPD to move the project forward through pre-ULURP. So that process entails bringing this project along with a more robust underwriting pro forma to our senior management to vote on whether or not this should proceed through pre-ULURP. Once that green light is given, or if that green light is given to proceed through ULURP, then the development team then focuses on the land use actions with HPD, and we check those land use actions with DCP to see if they're legally allowed or if they should be amended. And then at that point, we come back to the community board after we get these checks and these kickoff meetings to then provide a more robust proposal. So certainly if I'm sure the development team may not like to hear this, but if another project came before us with a proposal for these sites, that is something that could possibly be considered, but very unlikely. It takes a lot of years at times to get projects off the ground to this stage because developers have certain ideas. Then HPD says, well, in terms of our underwriting, that may not comport with affordability levels that a certain community has been requesting over the years. And it's even more exacerbated in a pandemic. So it's just critical that it got to the stage now where we're providing 2 ELA projects as a part of the program. So that's kind of how the sequencing of events take place with a project that's going through kind of a site control process or site authorization.
Okay. I mean, I'm just,
Does that answer your question?
Oh,
it does. Yeah, it does to an extent. I just, I agree with Andrew, and I do have some concerns and reservations about some of the issues that were brought up. And I understand that this is not approval of the project or approval of I know it's not approval of the project, but I wanted to see how far it was approving of Tau Prop as the person and marrying that. So that was the only question that I was proposing. So.
Well, the only approval that we're asking for is to continue discussions with HPD and city planning, I guess, to come up with a project that really would coalesce, into something that not just a name 2 ELA buildings, but exactly what that would entail. But Ms. Encarnacion, in terms of the HPD lot, it's so small and such a small part of our overall site that it really doesn't have value as a standalone site. Since we own, about 97% of the land that's within that site, I think it really, the best option, I think, is for us to work together on the entire site and really come up with a plan that the community board and the community, really would be proud of.
And that's the part I want to get. I want to get us to be proud of it.
Okay, Vianda, just for my own edification, I want to make sure I'm clear. Granting the approval to move forward in this process of discussions theoretically grants exclusivity of the developer to engage HPD. However, does not 100% rule out a competitive process, correct? That question was for you, Vianda.
I would not use the word exclusivity in this context.
Okay, great.
I do want to say though that it's, as always, Community Board 11 is great in making demands of us, of any city agency and of development teams as to what they want. I will say we actually use Community Board 11 as examples for other community boards in terms of how you have documented all of your requirements and the hiring plans and the marketing plans. And you always refer developers as well as HPD to all of the documents that you have stipulated as real demands. So having said that, I also want to say when we do, if there is a letter of support that is issued, again, the next step is to go to senior management for a vote. So again, during that vote, they're looking at the underwriting, they're looking at the program, and taking into consideration all that the community board has said, both pros and some of the other items that are challenges. And our team the planning team is responsible for kind of reporting on some of the or really the key asks that the community board has for the development team. So that affects and is a factor in HPD's final vote via the senior management team.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer, Vianda. Okay, at this time, we're going to close the Q&A. It is 10 minutes to 8 p.m. We will now open it up to members of the committee for a motion.
Ask for a point of clarification.
Sure, Jessica.
Stephen, I think this is, I'm not sure if it's a question for the committee or for HPD. I guess, is there an urgency to our letter of support? I know HPD has very time-honored cycles of evaluating, approving, and funding projects, and there are limits to what can move forward and when. And so I would, hearing the concerns that were brought up, but also in Candy's absence, giving a cheer for seeing so many units of Ella being put before us as a development plan. I guess I want to know if we're shooting ourselves in the foot by holding things up with our letter of support. If HPD would move forward without our support, or if HPD's consideration of this project is contingent upon our support at this point.
Good question. Thank you, Jessica. Vianda, can you answer that before we move forward?
Vianda, can you hear us?
Vianda? Is there anyone else from HPD?
That's a great question.
Vianda, can you hear us? I think our audio is going in and out.
Yeah, it looks like we lost her. Is there anyone else from HPD here?
Yeah, this is Joan. In terms of the letter support, it's just one of the, when we go to our senior management to decide if we're gonna move forward with this project, we usually want to get a, yes, Vianda.
Oh, hi, I really apologize. I keep going in and out. But that's a really important question. I would say there is an urgency in general to get started. We have a new administration that's coming in. And so this is an opportunity to proceed forward with 2 Ella projects. There are cycles when our term sheets change. I don't know when that cycle is coming up, but this gives the development team as well as HPD an opportunity to actually proceed forward with this project. And once the site authorization is granted, there's a year that the development team has to actually get their plans together to really proceed forward through ULURP. I mean, through pre-ULURP, it's not through ULURP, but it takes a while before through ULURP, but through pre-ULURP. And at that time, we would again come before the community board for any additional asks or concerns that you have. So I would say it's critical to actually move forward because we rarely are able to advance forward with one Ellis site, let alone two Ellis sites. And I'm not sure if I answered the second question or second part.
If I could also add to Ms. Morris, you know, the timeline here is a very long one. ULURP is a couple years, pre-development, and construction is another 3 years. Even if we move forward now with HPD and with a letter of support from Community Board 11, and everything went well, it could be 5 or 6 years easily before any low-income families could move into these two buildings. So I think the urgency is not only to, you know, the length of the process, but the urgent need that, you know, every day that it goes unmet, it's, you know, people who are suffering.
Thank you. Okay, Jessica, I hope that answers your point of clarification. I will now ask members of the committee for a motion. We'll recognize your motion. Not sure if Angel's here. We'll recognize your motion via the hand raise function. I see one hand raised. Jason?
Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for the comments and the feedback. I motion to provide a letter of support for the project.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Do we have a second?
I second Jessica Elliott.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion by Jason Villanueva, a second by Jessica Elliott to provide a letter of support for Talprop Equities to continue further engagement with HPD on the city-owned property that could be part of an assemblage within that footprint. Angel, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, Angel, before we proceed with the roll call, I believe Andrew has a pressing question.
I apologize. I just wanted to know if I could offer a friendly amendment.
If it's about the violations, HPD stated on the record that this application would not get approved prior to it going through city council.
I understand that. I would just like in the letter for it to express that we do this under the condition that all violations related to mold, mice, and water leaks be remedied at AK houses. So I definitely don't want to hold up the process, but I just want it to be clear that HPD, make it clear that our committee is aware of these issues and that while we do support this, we are supporting this as all these other things and conditional with, you know, doing right by the folks in our community.
Thank you, Andrew. Jason, do you accept the amendment?
Chair, point of clarification, there was a second to the motion. It's your choice.
All right, Angel, I'm not going to get caught up in process here. If Andrew provided a friendly amendment, it's been motioned, and Jessica Elliott, do you have any issue with the friendly amendment?
I personally support this friendly amendment.
Okay, and if Jason and Jessica support the friendly amendment, I'd like to proceed with a vote. Angel, is there any issue with this? That's a no?
That's a no.
All right, thank you. Jason, do you accept the friendly amendment?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Angel, please proceed with roll call.
Jessica Elliott,
Yes.
Elsie Encarnacion,
Yes.
Ivy Hume,
Yes.
Francis Mastroda,
Yes.
Jessica Morris,
Yes.
Andrew Padilla,
Yes.
Steven Villanueva,
Yes.
Jason Villanueva.
Yes.
Did Candy make it? Candy Vasquez? No. The motion passes.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the members of the committee, the public who weighed in, HPD and Talprop Equities for their time this evening. Thank you for the presentation. For everyone on the Zoom call tonight, this is not only an opportunity granted in theory, partly to the developer to engage HPD, but it's an amazing opportunity for the community board and the public to advocate for issues and or concerns with proposed developments way in advance before they even exist. I urge the community board members on this call tonight to review all the presentation materials, mine all the documents that were sent over today, populate questions. We will continue to keep this and track this in our rolling action item list. We'll carry it as old business. And in the future, as things may or may not develop, we will have a body of knowledge and advocacy that we can refer back to when things get a little bit more serious. And I just want to conclude with the fact that be mindful that this entire presentation could change completely by the time ULURP certification comes around for members of the community board that are new. Okay, thanks again to our presenters, HPD. I'd like to move on in the agenda.
Thank you very
Angel?
much.
Thank you.
Should we drop off? Should Tall Prop drop off?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Angel, could you just queue up what's next on the agenda for us, please?
Yep.
All right, we're at goals and accomplishments.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Fellow committee members, I was out on bereavement at our January meeting. Apologies. Goals and accomplishments is something that we all, are committed to reviewing, because at the end of the day, we're extremely passionate. We advocate. There's a ton of dialogue, but we need to be able to reflect periodically and make sure we got things done, that we can quantify the amount of time that we put in to the advocacy for the community. So in terms of goals and accomplishments, I just want to go over a few key points. I always bring up, I try to bring up accomplishments first so we can smell the roses. We all do a lot of work. A lot of us are zoomed out. But personally, I want to thank you all for consistent quorum, very comprehensive dialogue on any presentation that has come forth. We have a series of actions that we completed in the last year's meeting cycle. Angel, would you be able to point out those highlights for me?
Sorry, Steve, I was looking away. So, say again, what do you need me to do?
Can you point out I thought you said you were lifting weights. Could you point out the accomplishments we have listed to the committee?
Sure. Sorry, I was looking at something else behind your knee. Just a second here. Sure. So among the things that the committee accomplished last year, besides holding a series of public hearings on a number of items, it also passed, I thought it was important to highlight a number of, key land use application or voted on a number of key land use actions. First, earlier in the year, the committee voted to disapprove the Lennox Terrace rezoning upon 135th, I think it is, in CB10, but that directly abuts our district. Then we had substantive conversations with HPD about the proposed Harlem East Harlem Urban Renewal Plan, and ultimately voted to approve that with conditions. Thirdly, the committee voted on approving the neighborhood construction project East Harlem site at 2 East 130th Street. And last, the committee voted to approve the variance application for the East Harlem Scholars Academy High School project.
Thank you very much for that summary, Angel. Again, without full quorum, without getting the work done, we're just wasting our time and the community's time. So thank you guys all for your work. In terms of goals, I asked the members of this committee to list any goals you may have. If you do, this is the time to speak up on it. Presently, the goals that we're looking at are to further activate the landmarks portion of our committee's title. We have organizations like Landmarks East Harlem. We have, not as frequent as we would think, but Landmarks Preservation Committee items, they do come before this committee. I would like to look at, as a member of the board and someone who advocates for the community, I'd like to see a portion of our committee, perhaps a quarter of us, dedicated to reviewing the landmarks in general, existing landmarks, when LPC provides permit updates, and current issues that may be of concern that we're not aware of. I just got an email today saying that All Saints Church may or may not be up for sale. That's a pretty significant item of concern, because I remember Landmarks East Harlem discussing that as something they were engaging in a landmarks discussion on. So. And lastly, collaboration with the Economic Development, Culture, and Tourism Committee. What does that mean? Our wonderful member, Jessica Elliott, put forth a cross-committee collaboration tool that I know the Budget Committee, jumped on top of, and it's been something that we've aspired to work with. Landmarks, land use landmarks planning crosses several committees. We talk a lot about what a lot of committees are engaged in, whether it's the East Harlem Scholars Academy and its impact on the youth, potential benefits, numerous housing concerns that the Housing Committee, is passionate about. We engage their chair. And when reviewing our action items last year, I personally can't avoid that narrative that exists in our statement of district needs. I said it earlier today, and I'm going to say it till I'm done on this planet. This community suffers from an extreme lack of opportunities in terms of job placements, local hiring. One job for one person in this community could change the shape of their lives. I see it happen every day. So it's something we want to advocate for. However, during process, we've encountered some challenges, right? We as a committee have to weigh applications on their merits. We want to advocate for many things, but oftentimes it doesn't fit in the same bucket as the physical application and process that we're tasked with overseeing. So the chair of the Economic Development Committee is putting forth an initiative to support us. So what we would aim to do is take any developments that come before us and queue that up in their matrix to further the conversation and focus on the economic development portion of it, the cultural portion of it. And I think we can do the very same thing with parks and other committees, depending on how receptive those presenters would be in the process, which could ultimately determine their destiny in terms of a full board support or against for applications. So those are some of the goals that we brought up. Mayoral overrides are on our bullet list, not because it was something that was a long-standing issue for us, but it was an issue that was brought up nonetheless. There seems to be a bit of abuse of the mayoral override authority during this administration. And by abuse, I mean it just gets activated way more frequently than it ever was intended in our perception and in many of our conversations. So the one application, which was the NCP cluster that we voted on, I think back in December, was a mayoral override. They had a lot that was too small to develop under standard zoning, so they needed a mayoral override to work on this smaller lot. That was not the place to have a grand conversation on mayoral overrides, but due to some of the feedback that we received from various committee members and the expertise from George James, thank you, we see that it could fit as something that could be an ongoing project that we can review. And, whether it merits, a position, a resolution or something more. Right now, we're not going to dive into an entire mayoral overrides conversation. These are just goals. And the next step for you all as committee members and for the members of the public that are attending is to decide whether any of these points are important enough to you to carry on into further action, further dialogue, so that we can populate 2021 agendas with meaningful and important items that we can reflect on next year as quantifiable action that was taken. You heard HPD. They respect us for putting a narrative together that we can always refer them to. Instead of talking to a blue in the face, we'll send them a PDF of our local hiring guidelines. Instead of talking about concentrated poverty, we can show them our affordability guidelines. So those are just some of the takeaways from this committee's work. And I urge you all to participate in these discussions and populate your own goals, circulate them to myself, our Vice Chair, Elsie, and our staff liaison, Angel. So I'll open it up. We'll give this 10 minutes. And if there's anything that really needs to be deliberated on, we can follow up at next month's committee meeting. Do we have any questions or comments from our committee members? You can speak out of turn. Go ahead. I see hands raised. Jessica Elliott, go.
I was the only one who didn't unmute. Thank you for this. And I think just to contribute a handful of goals to consider. One, continue advocating for extremely low income housing development. Two, encouraging the development and preservation of open public space. Three, continue to push for local hiring. Four, encouraging deeper community engagement. And five, planning ahead for a preferred land use scenario for East Harlem when it comes to rezoning. We have something to offer up.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Jessica Morris.
Stephen, thank you for setting out. I love talking about goals because it means we have a strong leadership and a direction to all work together on. One thing I want to bring up, and maybe it's more pertinent to housing than land use, but Local Law 97 was passed as part of the Climate Mobilization Act, and it requires all buildings over 25,000 square feet to post an energy performance rating. I think retrofit, something we know along 3rd Avenue are landlords that forgot what their building looked like. I think, you know, there are going to be penalties that they're going to have to pay ultimately if buildings don't perform well. So I think we have a great opportunity to advocate for reinvestment and retrofit to put a lot of housing back in play in our district. And I would argue that this is a follow-up from rezoning, but that the Climate Mobilization Act and Local Law 97, which I'm happy to say more about, really is something that's in play throughout East Harlem. I think it can do a lot. So I would like to follow that through and provide a little bit of information through some research, that sort of thing, for our committee to understand and maybe work with housing on. Additionally, with regard to landmarks, I had a wonderful conversation earlier today with Chris Cirillo, who is on the call and wears a number of different hats, but he brought up a really wonderful point that I think is super valuable. There is a difference between federal, state, and local designations and funding streams for landmarks, for historic districting, for preservation activities. And so I think the landmark is the object, the building, but preservation is the activity that supports cultural heritage, authentic places, the type of cultural history that exists deep in East Harlem. So I would suggest that this committee, even though our purview is land use, I think with landmarks comes a responsibility to kind of answer that preservation call, not only from a retrofit and rehabilitation perspective, but also from what it can do when you take care of and support the cultural heritage of a place. So that very much overlaps with EcoDev and their purview, but is seated in a landmarks process in some cases. So I look
Great.
forward to working together for another year.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Elsie?
Hey, so I might take us in a little bit of a different direction, and I apologize in advance for that. But I did want to maybe ask if it was possible to add something to it, just because. So one of the things that I think that we should be focused on and maybe work on as well is the participation of the community in our community board meetings and the understanding of the community about land use. And so I know that it's a very heavy topic. Sitting on land use really scares me sometimes. And you know, it's heavy and it's dense. And I think that it would benefit the community if we had more outreach from us to the community and talking about ways that they could understand it better and how it affects them ultimately. And so it's just something that I've been thinking about a lot in terms of like, when we started this meeting, I was really excited because there was a lot of people here. And then when Prop left, a lot of people left. And so I noticed that there's not a lot of like community members here. So I just think that we should, maybe fit that in. And as we start
Agreed.
to make these decisions, we make sure that we at minimum informing, engaging, and educating the communities, especially around the areas that we're making decisions for.
Thank you very much, Elsie. It's a very valid point. One of the things we often reflect upon, myself, various members of the committee, but, myself, Angel, and Elsie, when planning these meetings is we segment a portion of our time to process, not just what are we doing, but how are we doing it? We can only get this work done if it's done effectively. We can only get the community to really be heard if they're aware, knowledgeable, and feel like they have a certain level of confidence to participate. On the budget side, which I'm gonna, talk to our treasurer, Mr. Villanueva, every year we are allocated, I believe, $500 as a committee to perform anything that would serve the community. I see Jason shaking his head, and I know that we're in the midst of a pandemic, so I'm not 100% sure what funding looks like for us as a committee. And as a board, it's something that I'll bring back to our executive committee meeting and look at. But what you're talking about, Elsie, fits right there. Many times the land use committee gives their $500 portion of community outreach to another committee to help build up another committee's work, like Housing Echo. Last year, we supported economic developments, small business forums and outreach. So perhaps this year, this committee can take an initiative to perform some level of outreach, and perhaps with the electronic communication that we're constantly involved in, we could get more participation. One thing I noticed is our participation is through the roof since going to Zoom. I don't know how representative that is of the community. However, we want to make sure that they can participate. Yeah, I echo that, Jason. Thank you. All right, we'll move on. Jessica, Elliott, did you have more to contribute?
I just had a quick comment based on Elsie's wonderful comment. I just wanted to remind everyone that I'm involved with the ULI Urban Plan, which is a program to teach high school and college age students. And there's also an additional program for public officials about the planning process. And you have a fictional block where you can decide, what developments go where, whether it's housing or offices or parks. And then you have to negotiate with other people who are community groups or the city's tax revenue that they have to achieve and the developers' goals for profit. So it's a really fun project for students. And I would encourage anyone who knows any school teachers or any schools in the neighborhood that we could bring this to. I've been trying to get this program in our neighborhood for a while. So please help me out, and Elsie is going to help me.
Thank you, Jessica. Jason, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, it was more of a comment than as opposed to a goal. One of the things, I don't know how the other members feel, but just I've seen since September a lot of complaint about preparation. And in particularly, I guess where it really bugs me personally is when it happens during the presentations or when it happens the day of the meetings, where some members complain. And I understand that because I get wanting to know the full scope and synopsis of the challenge that's in front of us so we can accurately make a decision. I don't know if we're going to answer this today, but a goal would be to be better prepared for these meetings. In particular, a lot of questions that were asked today were on the questionnaire that was sent out by Angel this morning. I do understand it was just sent out this morning. So my thought is how do we have discussions probably, to be better prepared proactively prior to this meeting. It's not something to, again, to figure out today, but I know I brought it up at the executive level, and I know there's always a concern about membership. I'm talking about board business without going through the formal process. But example, sometimes we just want to have discussion. We want to understand a project. We want to understand just little particulars. And I'm just trying to figure out how that cohesive process can happen outside of the over formalization of the actual process.
My response to your comment, Jason, is, just a couple of notes here. Number one, that falls all on the leadership of the committee. So as the land use chair, the number one priority for me is to ensure that our committee members receive meeting materials and information in a timely fashion. That is a goal that is in perpetuity. There's been times many years ago where it was a challenge. There's been times where it's been excellent. However, it's something that all of us as individual board and committee members have to, just make a priority, is making sure that we're prepared. However, with that being said, we're also working people with families. So if a particular committee member didn't have an opportunity to review a 20-page checklist, we will grant them the opportunity to ask those questions here. But we will juggle it. I mean, I definitely agree with you that we have more effective and efficient meetings when everyone's well prepared. But listen, the public needs to hear these things as well. So I think continuing to make sure that it's a focal point process, and that we as leadership are providing committee members the materials as early as possible. Given that some of them do come back directly from those presenters, as you noted today. So it'll be a constant goal of ours. Andrew, was there anything you want to say before we move on?
I'm going to attempt to say it quickly. Just back to the goal of sharing knowledge about like the land use and zoning. Like this is always a thing, right? Like, yes, it is very dense. But there's also like general concepts that aren't quite as dense. And I think that a way in for the lay person is to start with the general concepts, right? Like there are rules that exist in the way that you do this. That's a way in. Like today, the term, the expression term sheets was shared a number of times. Reminding folks once that's raised, right? Like we can do this, right? So HPD said term sheets, and we can say when we're following up, we can say, the HPD's term sheets are how they determine the following, and copies of those term sheets are available on their website, right? A couple of years ago, just dating myself a little bit, baseball went on strike, right? And they lost a whole bunch of viewership, and they were scared that they were losing out in popularity to other sports. So what they did when they came back is they did just that. So when they did the play-by-play for the game, they would say, okay, somebody got a hit, and they would explain then what the strategy was before the next play would happen. And that's always stuck with me. I think that's something that we could try to mimic with the community board, where, it just takes another second or two to also include that bit of, education for the attendees that aren't hearing term sheets and affordability and AMI as regularly as we do. And you don't have to go on expansively, but if you can give just a quick kind of, this is what this means, and you can find it here, and you can find it here, and you can find it here, that is helpful. Also, reminding folks that, we have had accomplishments, right? with community boards generally, but with land use specifically, it's usually a long game, right? And the needs are right now. So you want the answer right now, which makes sense, but it just takes a while. And reminding folks that we have had successes. We have had frustrations too, but we have had successes. And if you look back a year, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, you'll see them like, oh, that's not bad. We did some good stuff. So when Vianda was saying earlier, referring to our processes, and Joe Tall was explaining, the almost 1,000 units of affordable housing that have been, preserved, through conversations with him, right? Where that wasn't the case when we started the conversation, but now looking back 8 years later, the reality is the people that were living there, have that, that sense of, surety as to what their home has been preserved as affordable where there was a threat that possibly it couldn't be, right? Does that mean that Joe Tall or anybody else is perfect? No, of course not. But it's still a fact that the units were preserved as a consequence of this community board engaging with that organization towards that goal. So then fast forward to now, when Andrew brings up this evening about the violations and pushing to make that a condition, that's the kind of thing that we certainly should be doing and that the public should be hearing us doing, because they can relate to that. They're like, oh yeah, well, what's the community board doing about it? Well, the community board is saying that as a condition of our support, we need you to clear these violations, right? As a condition of our support, we need to do the following. And that helps the community understand the work that we're doing on their behalf. That's me speaking succinctly.
Stephen, can I just respond to
Thank you very
Angel?
much for that, Angel. Sure, Jessica. We're going to conclude this conversation in 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Of course. One, this is why Angel is legendary. And two, it seems really simple, Angel, your suggestion to offer out that knowledge when we engage in asking questions, but it is a fundamental shift in the work that we're doing. And so I thank you very much for calling that out and sort of pulling back on the reins to say, why are we asking these questions? And taking that opportunity to Elsie's point, engage folks who may be here trying to better understand what's going on and how it affects them. I can't thank you enough.
Great. Thank you all. Okay, I'm going to conclude this conversation on goals with the following. Anyone who's presented a goal, anyone who's thinking of a goal, and the goals that we've reviewed tonight, they're specific, which was one of the boxes I needed to check. They're measurable, which is a box we needed to check. The next thing is to put a sense of urgency behind yourself. I'm not talking about next month. I'm talking about come up with a timely plan as to how to execute these goals. What is the plan to get there? And if there is undefined, let's start to refine what that looks like. This is going to be an ongoing dialogue. Ivy has done us a great service of collecting all these notes. I've taken notes. I know our Vice Chair Elsie has taken notes. And we'll generate a list of many of these goals. And I'm going to ask of our committee members to come up with your plan. What's the plan to get there? What will the next narrative from this committee that gets ratified by the board look like? Would it be a combination of these things? Will it be separate agenda items that we immortalize and add to this checklist? So please keep that in mind. All right, moving on. Angel? Okay, Angel, do you want to just give us a brief summary on this?
I have to stop sharing my screen because I don't remember all these. So you guys are tired of hearing this because every other committee is having much longer conversations than land use is going to have. Because land use typically only has like 2 or 3 recommendations. I need to shift over to my other screen so I can remember what they are. So if you will indulge me, I will do just that. Sorry, I promise I'll be there in a second. Okay. So you'll remember last fall, each of the committees and of course the board, worked on submitting our annual statement of district needs, coordinated in hand in hand with the district needs and budget committee. And we submitted that at the end of October. And then the next phase in that, once community boards submit their, needs and budget requests, is, for the city to, receive that, analyze that, and respond. And typically that response comes along with the issuance of the mayor's preliminary budget, which is the, I guess the first official kind of step in the budget negotiation process, right? So the mayor will announce his preliminary budget in January. There'll be discussions, there'll be public hearings, there'll be discussions with, with the city council. Then in the spring, the budget will be revised slightly, well, technically supposed to be, revised slightly based on the input from the public hearings and the discussions with, the council and hearing from advocates and communities. And we'll get the executive budget, which then we'll have hearings again, and then the mayor and the council, budget team goes into, into negotiations for the final budget that will be voted on and ratified as the adopted budget by the end of June. But at this step, we hear back from, where we are now, we've heard back from the, the mayor and his agencies regarding each of our budget requests, right? And I've pulled out, well, Carly did for me, pulled out the requests from the land use committee and the responses that we got. So I started off by saying that land use doesn't typically have many. We typically have the same ones each year. We're looking for, continued development of affordable housing. We're looking for, increasing literacy around ULURP and providing trainings, and housing, and looking to develop on vacant or underutilized properties and ensuring that, properties are being rehabilitated for use as affordable housing, right? So you'll tell me, anyone, if this is too small, I will increase the size. If not, then I'll just keep scrolling along. So you'll see on the first line.
Looks fine.
Looks fine, great. So you'll see on line 3, budget request number 1, capital. We were asking for, under the category of providing more housing for special needs households, our descriptor was provide funding for the development of affordable housing at deeper levels of affordability, targeting households living under 30% of AMI, right? So that was spoken to in part, and HPD is hearing this and they continued, this is like a rolling yes, and we're continuing to work on it, is the response from HPD. And it's reflected in the project that they presented, an hour ago, the 2 L's, right? That's their lowest term sheet, lowest AMI term sheet. You'll see here in column H, where we get the standard response that we get each year for this request. It's basically them saying yes, they're going to do it within the resources that they already exist. This because this is a rolling goal, both of theirs as well as ours. Moving over here. SDN review funding for this administrative agency has been cut approximately, I don't know what this note is, approximately $1.6 million. I think this is in the capital budget. Jason, is this your note from your committee or is this a Carly note?
My note.
Okay.
That's from the revenue, but of the those 2 agencies, that agency was cut 1.6 and the other one was cut. But it's just it's citywide, it's all 5 boroughs.
Right, so these are capital funds, right?
And that's a good question. It said revenue, so I presume it's both.
Yeah, I believe it's capital. They were slowing down on development as a result of the pandemic. But they are, beginning to move projects forward. And then on line 4, budget request 2 capital to provide under the category of providing more housing for extremely low and low income households. Our descriptor was there remain many vacant properties underutilized residential buildings in East Harlem. It is imperative that the community elected officials and HPD work collaboratively to create necessary incentives for property owners or private property owners to upgrade or maintain their properties for active residential use. So basically, we want these properties rehabilitated. We want these underutilized or vacant properties to be, developed for housing. So they're very similar requests, but we want to trying to be specific to the rehabilitation piece. And again, you'll see in column H, there is the standard response of the agency will accommodate within existing resources. Like I said, with the previous ones, it's like a rolling thing that they are certainly working on. And you see the SDN review comment the same as above that Jason just explained to us. And then lastly, on row 6, budget request 4E, which is expense, as it was a new request this year, under the category of increased community board training, including on core land use process and practices. Our descriptor, our explanation being provide funding for digital ULIP trainings, as well as outreach to promote the new trainings in East Harlem. These trainings would educate the community on how to engage with the new digital ULIP process and make their voices heard on land use development process, including affordable housing creation for East Harlem. That was like an Andrew recommendation, I'm pretty sure. So they're saying that they're giving the same response. They will accommodate within existing resources. Funding for this administrative agency was cut by 1.4. I don't think that applies.
So, Angel, if you don't mind me commenting on this,
yeah.
Out of the three, and Andrew, if you want to jump in, please do. The first two items, I agree. I think it's longstanding. It's our position. We posture. I don't necessarily see a need for response. But the third item, the only reason in my mind I'm flagging it is because they particularly is stating that funding is not available at this time. And I know one response comes from OMB, and then one response comes from HPD. So if HPD gave us that they will accommodate, and I know we'll deal, and for those of you keeping up, we have district consultations in the summer where we can meet with the administrative agencies. For this letter to respond to comment about the current budget, I would think if this committee is concerned, it would be with this item. Again, it's my opinion only.
Sure. That's all I have to say on that. Thank you, Jason. Stephen?
I'm sorry, I lost you for 30 seconds with my connection. Say that again, Angel.
We were just saying how wonderful everybody else on the committee except for you was.
Yeah, thanks. That sounds about right. That sounds about right. We're ready to proceed. So what is, Angel, what is our next move with regards to the budget? I guess the bottom line here is we have our line items. I want to know what's next.
Yeah, so I agree with Jason. I think that in terms of like, a comment for inclusion in the response, I think focusing on the third one.
Okay. All right. How can we focus on that? What needs to be done?
Like you have to craft a response. What do you want to say?
Okay. All right. And then what's our timeline on crafting the narrative?
Today.
Seriously?
Yes.
I wouldn't say narrative as much as a response to the fact
it's like a sentence or so.
Yeah.
You can give it to me in the morning if you want.
Yeah, it's not as drastic as what we did in the beginning of the cycle.
Okay, so Jason, the agency supports the request, but funding's not available. The statement of district needs committee further emphasizes their budget cut. What would be a reasonable response? Do we just continue to keep this on our capital and budget expense request into the following year? How can we strengthen our approach?
That would be definitely, I agree with that tactic, but particular for this action, this process, we're responding to the mayor's budget. And in the first two items, we have a good relationship with HPD. I don't know this committee's relationship with DCP to do this follow-up in the next 24 hours. But since the agency is telling you that they will use existing resources and the city is telling you that the resources are not available at this time, it's just a matter of how dire the committee wants to advocate for that item, because this letter of comment is an option for advocacy. So, if you guys just want to respond to it, great. You don't want to get too technical with it today. It's something that My committee will meet on Thursday and we'll definitely be polishing up for the other committees.
What, does the response have to be ratified?
It will be
tonight?
voted, it will be voted on. I mean, it doesn't have to be voted through your committee. It'll be voted.
So we
on
could
tonight.
generate consensus and move
Yes.
forward.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Stephen, may I-
Before we close out, Jessica Morris.
Yeah, may I bring up a point? I think if the agency supports the request, but there is not funding available, then that alludes to them being able to somehow utilize the existing process to fulfill this ask. I think we experienced a lot of FaceTime, more so with HPD than DCP through the fall around the Harlem, East Harlem urban renewal discussions. But I don't know that that was, to Angel's point, a learning opportunity when perhaps it could have been or should have been. So I guess part of the response may be to use existing processes to support this ask somehow.
Can I clear something up for you, Jessica, if it helps? We're writing a letter to the mayor to advocate for these agencies, if that makes sense. So it's either we're gonna ask the mayor for more money for this agency to acquire the funding to deal with our ask, or wait until August, which is what you're bringing up or trying to bring up, I think, in my opinion, with the district consultations where we'll sit with DCP and say, hey, how are you planning on doing this? To me, that's a day late and a dollar short. But again, that's my opinion. It's up to the body.
I think this, like, my sense is that you guys want to keep it on and you want to keep advocating for it. So we can just reassert that this is very important and just reword it.
Is there
So
any way to
I
make
can knock that out tonight if you guys agree. Sorry?
Is there any way to make it like data driven? Like, is there any information, like, I guess what we're saying is that there's a new ULA process that's digital and we need to inform people of it so that they could take part in that. Is there any way to show the difference of the amount of community members who are able to participate in that versus what they were able to participate when it was in person? To kind of show that drop off? I mean, does that exist? I
don't think this is speaking so much to participation at our meetings. I think it's speaking
not at our
to,
meetings. I'm saying in the ULA process. But there's it's asking for a digital training on the digital, right? I'm sorry, I made it smaller on my screen. Hold on. It's asking for trainings to educate the community on how to engage with the new digital ULA process, right?
Yes.
So saying that, like, showing how many people are using it now currently, so what people were using prior to it being digital. You understand what I'm saying? As a part of the argument, saying why we
so
want them.
I think I know what you're saying, but using what? Because before they went digital, it was paper-based. So how do we quantify how many people were?
That's the only thing. The question
Do
was,
we have any of those metrics?
Is there a way to make the statement data driven instead of just saying like?
No, I get you. I just don't know how.
I don't either. I was just asking if there
All
was.
right, so look, why don't we pontificate on how to quantify that data in the next 24 hours? But as the window closes, we should just have a response, period. Whether it's, we'll see you, next month, we'll be testifying, this will be carried out. I put in a draft response just based off of theirs into the chat. If it's a little too strong or if anybody wants to adjust it, that's fine. It's my recommendation that our committee definitely comments on record. If we want to go with this, make a final update at SDN, we can do that as well. This doesn't have to be ratified tonight. I know it's it's always tough when you're under pressure to come up with a couple of lines, but nonetheless, check the chat. If you want to add something to it, remove something to it, get it in before brunch tomorrow so that this can be reviewed by the SDN committee. Before we conclude, I'm going to give it to Jessica Elliott and then we're moving on.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to make a suggestion in terms of framing why. I think we can point to the planning together presentation that we heard from last month and the amount that they expect community engagement, regular people, community boards, community-based organizations to be able to participate in that process. They're going to need an understanding and a degree of teaching to know how to participate in that process in the first place. So that could be something to use as a jumping off point.
That's a great point. Can you dump it into the chat so it can be copy and pasted? Okay, I was going to close this, but I see Andrew put his hand up, and with the great work he did tonight, I'd like to hear what he has to say. Go ahead.
Oh, it was actually exactly in the vein of what Jessica said. I could see a sentence just being like, if we are really attempting as a city to plan together, our communities need to understand that process. The process has significantly changed. So yeah, the process has significantly changed. If we are going to plan together, our community needs to understand it. And this investment helps ensure that.
Agreed. Between Jessica Elliott and Andrew Padilla, can you dump that in the chat or email it accordingly to Angel? I would include Jason, as he is the chair of SDN, so this narrative can be included in our response. Any other questions, any issues before we move on? Okay, thank you. Angel, let's move on in the agenda.
Sorry, it's a limitation of one screen.
Advocate for a second screen for Angel.
Let's cure this COVID. I could go back to my great two screens. Okay, so that's the budget. All right, George, you're on.
Okay, great. Angel, can I get this? Can I get control of the screen?
Why didn't you say that before I did all this?
I'm sorry, man. I didn't know what you were doing. I apologize.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
My fault.
No,
Okay,
you're good, pal. You're good.
Listen, I know it's late, and really, Stephen, if you want me to cut it short or something, you'll just say it, or people want it.
How much time do you need, George?
I'm sorry?
How much time do you need?
Like 10 minutes or so.
That's fine. All right, so let's stay on our timeline. We're flexible, obviously. You are our land use consultant. And again, this is not an action item for tonight. This is an ongoing conversation. So go ahead and take the floor.
Yeah, okay. It's an ongoing conversation. That's exactly right. So, you heard this, the idea of doing a comprehensive plan in January. Most jurisdictions have a comprehensive plan. These are a few that were on my computer that I've worked on. But many of them, most of them in New York State do. And, there are rules that govern these things. And in New York State, it's a defined term. A comprehensive plan is a comprehensive plan under state law. And the most important part of that really is that zoning changes have to be consistent with a well-considered plan. And if you have a comprehensive plan, then it has to be consistent with that under New York state law. But we don't do things that way, right? In New York City, we don't do that because we don't have a comprehensive plan. We evaluate zoning changes on this case-by-case basis when applicants come in, be it city planning or HPD or private applicants. And the land use rationale is justified for that project at that time. What this does is it really prevents community-based organizations, community boards, people who advocate for their community for proactively planning for their community. To me as a planner, it's unfortunate. One of the only times that we did a rezoning with a comprehensive like plan was here in the East Harlem neighborhood plan, which is which is a fantastic plan. It is a comprehensive plan for the East Harlem neighborhood. It had, you know, all these different topics in it. I know not everybody here was around at that time, but this plan is was done before the rezoning, but it guided the rezoning. It had a land use plan with zoning recommendations in the East Harlem neighborhood plan, but essentially there would be certain areas that wouldn't be touched. There would be certain areas which would be preserved, and then there would be certain areas that would be targeted for upzonings for affordable housing to map inclusionary zoning in them. When DCP came out with their zoning proposal, it didn't match what the plan said exactly, but it was certainly consistent with it. And in fact, the final adopted zoning was even closer to the recommendations from the plan. And the idea that council has is essentially to do like a land use plan that exists in the East Harlem neighborhood plan everywhere, in every community district. It's incredibly ambitious, considering the amount of work that went into the East Harlem neighborhood plan. They want to do that for the entire city. But the details matter a lot. And so what I was going to do now is essentially summarize some of the high level process, and then talk about some thoughts about this that you might want to consider. And again, if you want to interrupt me, please do, and ask questions. This is for you. So, each community district will be assigned a growth target by a long-range plan steering committee. What is a long-range plan steering committee? It's these 13 appointees that will essentially say, oh, community district 11 will have to grow. We'll have to plan for 10% household growth and 15% employment growth. And those targets will be binding, meaning your land use plans will have to show how they fulfill those growth targets. And it's unclear how the targets will be developed, but it appears there'll be a lot of data that goes into it, but it appears that local people like yourself will have little direct input on these targets that are assigned to you. There will be community engagement, extensive community engagement about where and how this growth will be accommodated. The community engagement will be led by the mayor's office. The community board and the members and community-based organizations, you're going to be stakeholders in the engagement. You're not going to lead it. After the community engagement, the mayor's office will develop 3 different land use scenarios to accommodate the growth. Now, the next part is actually cut and pasted from the plan. And I needed to do this because what was said in January was slightly different. This is what it says. Community boards, borough presidents, and the long-term plan steering committee will each recommend one preferred land use scenario for each relevant community district. These opinions will be advisory only and for council's deliberation. So what does that mean? So you get to recommend one of these scenarios that the mayor's office developed, and you're going to be one of 3 recommendations for the land use scenarios. City council has final say. They have to have for the plan to have force of law. But so in some, so you have the steering committee setting out the growth targets, the mayor's office doing community engagement, the mayor's office developing the plans. You get the vote on one of the 3, and then city council adopts. You don't see in this land use process very much community board or community organizations being involved. And then this is an important thing that I think needs to be understood, is that the adopted land use plan does not actually have to be followed. And this makes it different from the general New York State process. Applicants must file something called a statement of alignment, and which says, yes, this proposal is consistent with plan. No, it's not consistent with plan. And if it's not consistent with plan, it can still go forward. And under any other place in New York State, that wouldn't be true. And so, if you read it literally, the proposal should make rezonings easier, right? The city is going to do a generic environmental impact statement on the land use plan. If the zoning is consistent with plan, then a full EIS is not required. So that takes a huge burden off the applicant to do an EIS with their application. And it's frankly going to be, if you don't like what they're proposing, it's much harder to oppose or change it. And if a rezoning is inconsistent with plan, then it would just go through the process very similar to our current Euler process. And, you know, there are lots of unknowns though, right? You know, the big unknown to me is how seriously are these land use plans going to be taken? Like, will the council members support rezonings that are not consistent with plan? Or will that be something like, you know, I can't do that, it's not consistent with plan. You know, I don't know how they're going to be treating these things. I don't think any of us do. It's an unknowable question. And then, you know, this is, as somebody who is involved in the East Harlem neighborhood planning process and other comprehensive planning processes in other communities, the process itself is outstanding, right? It's an opportunity for the community to come together and articulate shared values and goals and put them down on paper and come to consensus. And there's some questions about that. So if growth targets are instituted by this outside body, how does that work? You know, what happens if you all disagree? You know, you want to grow more, you want to grow less. What happens if there's a conflict there? I don't know. And then finally, the mayor's office is leading the process, interpreting the feedback, developing the land use scenarios. Well, how does that work actually with the community coming together and the shared values and goals? And what happens if they don't interpret the community engagement process as everyone else who was a part of it does? So these are my own personal opinions of how, like, when I read this, like, and with my own experience, like, why, you know, things that you should all think about. Like, the biggest thing that I see with this is putting the mayor's office in charge of community engagement. Why can't the community boards lead the community engagement process, right? Why couldn't you develop a model similar to what happened in the East Harlem neighborhood plan, where the community board was one of 4 partners that essentially engaged with the community and community-based organizations to come together to develop consensus around the land use plan, and along a comprehensive plan. Really, it was more than a land use plan. You know, you're better suited to do that than the mayor's office, right? It's like, you think about this, is the mayor's office leading community engagement? I don't actually know how that's going to work.
And what with a new mayor?
Well, yeah, right, and there'll be a new mayor as well, right? You know, the community board, instead of the mayor's office developing the plan and leading the engagement, what about the community board developing its own land use plan for the district, which could then be provided to the borough presidents and the mayor's office for their input and their recommendations? I mean, it's, you know, community boards used to be called community planning boards years and years ago, right? Because they used to have, years and years ago, a bigger role in the process. I mean, city council would still have to have final say on the land use scenario because they're elected. But, you know, it's something that community boards are really well suited to do this if they are properly resourced. And that was the thing about the East Harlem neighborhood plan. Because this was Melissa's district, she got a lot of resources to pay for a lot of things that went into that plan. And if you have proper resources, most community boards could probably do a very good job with this. That's my thinking anyway. Because we know it could be done because of this. Because this plan was the proof of concept that could be done. So I'm almost done here. I've just been focusing on land use and zoning. There are many, many other things in planning together, things that I'm really not, I really shouldn't talk about because I don't know a lot about. Capital planning strategy, capital needs assessments, the district needs assessments and changing how those are done, more coordination across city agencies. And all of those things actually sound fantastic. But I also know that I'm not an expert in how we do these things in New York City right now. And there may be other people on this committee who can speak more as to, the appropriateness of those changes. And then finally, the next steps. Earlier this week on Monday, they announced the hearing for February 23rd at 10 a.m. at City Council. And that's sooner than I thought it was going to be, but that's what they did. And if you want to go testify or submit testimony, you could testify on the 23rd live or submit written testimony, I think within 14 days of that hearing date.
George, can I ask how long is this? It's a bill that's in committee right now being worked on.
Yes.
And is it possible that it will stay in committee past this hearing? What is its process? And I think the East Harlem community and the process that you bring to the table, the neighborhood plan, that was huge, monumental, and foundational for a bottom-up process. It's how I got involved in all of this.
Oh, really?
Going to a meeting, learning, sitting with community members and hearing from, in an engagement process. But how I think our input, I know community boards change, but there is a lot of institutional knowledge here that can offer insight. And I think it would be a shame if we were not able to be a part of that discussion in this legislation that's on the table.
Oh, I completely agree. and that's why I encourage people to testify, develop your own comments to submit. What happens with this is that, or at least talking to Annie, she says that there is a lot of times there are major changes that happens to legislation after they get comments from people. And it's not only the stuff on the record, it's these meetings that are off the record, which are, you call her up and say, we want to have a meeting. And I know that people have been doing these already, and they've been taking these meetings. And so where you could, speak a little bit more frankly about your concerns. And she's offered to do those, right? If you or a small group of you want to get together and talk about your concerns and the possible improvements, they've said that they're willing to set up these calls. It's better to have them before the hearings, and the hearing is not very far away. But just because they have a hearing doesn't mean you can't have those discussions, right?
Thank you, George. So if we have an issue, question, something we want to change, we want more involvement, so on and so forth, the mechanism to do so would be to testify.
Yes.
That's one mechanism.
Yes.
You can testify as an individual, or the committee could, or the board would have to, I don't know how that would work in terms of board representation, something that I believe came up at our full board, something I have to inquire about. You also mentioned that we could engage them since they came to CB11 first. It creates an opportunity to engage and sort of build upon the communication there. And perhaps we could tally, a list of comments that come from this committee tonight, or in the coming days, and then send them to Ann, I believe, who did the presentation, for a response. Correct? All right. So there's a couple of options there. All right. It is 9:02. I'm going to open it up to the raised hands, and then we'll conclude with just a Q&A with Angel briefly. Don't get stressed out. Andrew, followed by Elsie.
Well, I just wanted to say, generally I have a lot of feelings about this. At its core, it appears as though an attempt to make development easier and give more certainties to developers, try and push community members and council members to be less obstructionist, but without a ton of attention, I think, as you highlighted, to the way politics actually work in New York City. or kind of a willful ignorance of it. I mean, I'm still blown away at the idea of the mayor leading this. I mean, community boards, you know, are at times pretty detached from community. East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. Yes, that was, you know, certainly a departure from how things had been done, but still, you know, was not as rooted or bottom up as it certainly could have been. And so the notion that the mayor's office is going to run this, it just, to me, it's nonsense. And I think it's kind of funny how bad this probably will end up turning out. Whether it doesn't pass or whether it passes and doesn't work actually in practice. But I feel bad that that so much effort is being spent in a direction that isn't really taking into consideration the context of how politics and land use and just how these relationships intersect, or at least not prioritizing community, even though the idea is that it's inspired by or that we're attempting to reach some sort of community plan. And so I actually really like George's idea of us as a community board, you know, actually advocating for the money to do this type of planning, to actually do the work we're in theory supposed to do. You know, community boards are often pretty detached from community. Community members don't even really know what we are, but we're certainly more connected than the mayor's office. And, you know, we do have a pulse and we do have an understanding in a way, you know, many other folks just don't. And you know, if there's I have a lot of individual issues here, and I could take up a bunch of time piercing through everything I've heard and what I've read so far of this, but I want to speak to what I like. And I really do like that idea of us demanding that CBs actually get the money to envision, that we get the money and support to envision our community's future. Part of the reason why we struggle so often to spend the time ourselves, part of the reason we struggle so often to get community members engaged in this process is there's a lack of investment in what we're even in theory supposed to do. And so I think the answer is to invest. And I think that's much closer to community planning, if that's what we're trying to do. So I just wanted to say, I don't know if you're the point of that. I don't know if that was an offhand comment or like a strong recommendation, but I really like that idea of that I heard from George there.
Perhaps we can throw that narrative into our responses globally to the budget as part of an overall effort to demand, you know, the ability to do so. Moving on, Elsie.
I mean, Andrew took some of the words right out of my mouth. I think my question was really about if at any point they spoke about the funding that would be needed for the mayor's office to accomplish this, and have they done like a cost analysis in terms of what it would be like if they just funded community boards to do that work. The work for the neighborhood plan, which I did work on, and I was doing the education stuff and the school stuff on this side. So I chaired that committee. And really because George Sarkisian, who was the district manager at the time and a huge liar, said I would only have to go to 2 meetings. And months later, I was still sitting at those meetings. So, but it was super engaging and we kept checking back in with the community. And I agree, there was still a ton that could have been done, but it was moving and there was a lot of feedback. There were a ton of community-based organizations on that movement. And, you know, with proper funding and considering the funding that will have to be used in the mayor's office to make this work, we would probably use like a quarter of that to really supply the community with the information and with the communication that they need, because they're just going to get new suits and have meetings and we need to reach the community. So I just think that, you know, it's really important for us to push that narrative. And I guess, I mean, the initial question was money spoken about at all, and funding for this bill spoken about?
So to answer that last question, is that as it was explained to me by Annie, because I asked a similar question, she said what they do is they make the legislation and set up requirements, and then later they fund those things. So it's a 2-step process. So, you know, my point is, I think to your point, Elsie, is that is that the responsibility has to go to someone. They gave it to the mayor's office. That means the money will eventually follow that. If they gave it to the community boards, they would eventually have to follow it. Now I know that one of their worries is that some community boards, really a handful of community boards, really are underperformers. They don't have a lot of infrastructure in place. And they worry about like, well, you know, would they have the capacity to do that? And, you know, my point, you know, I would say is, well, yeah, okay, so some people fail. Well, then you have a fail safe. Well, the mayor's office could come into some places that refuse to do the work. Fine. But, you know, 80% of them will gladly take on this role as long as there are the resources that are there. At least that's my opinion.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys for your questions. It is 10 after 9. Jessica, do you have a pressing question?
I have a statement. It won't take too long. I've recently taken on a role as co-chair of the Planning and Urban Design Committee with AIA New York. And so in that role, I will have some ears and opportunities, I'm sure. And I think the experience that this community board has gone through, Elsie, your experience, particularly Andrew, your point, and I think George, your analysis is so valuable, and to find a way to make sure that it's heard is really, it's important to me, I think, in what I can bring to this. So finding a way to put that forward one way or another. The conversation doesn't stop with the hearing next week. I think it's an ongoing process to figure out, is there a way to have both and have resource community boards and comprehensive planning that work in concert? That would be an ideal world outside of the politics, Andrew, that drive things here. But as an idealist, I think we can put it forward because of the way that this community does its work.
Okay, thank you, Jessica.
Stephen, can I just say something as well?
Sure.
Thank you. So I think that this planning together a comprehensive plan thing is being in part presented as an opportunity for community-based planning from the bottom up. But as George was explaining with mayor, it doesn't sound anything like that, right? And I think that point has to be made, that this is not, as it's been crafted in any way, shape, or form, community-informed planning. I think there's, this is just my opinion, it seems like lip service. It seems like, you know, dangling a carrot of something that seems very interesting and that would get people's hopes up. Like when I first read it, I'm like, oh yeah, that would be great. But then in reading a little more, you know, more carefully, I'm like, I don't know. I think the way that they've crafted it, I think would feed cynicism. It would make it hard for community boards and community, you know, led efforts to get people to the table. Like part of the challenge when we did the East Harlem neighborhood plan was, yes, politics that kept people off the table, and also cynicism that kept people away from the table, right? So that's a challenge that you have to overcome, right? So you have that experience, you can take away, okay, we did all these things great, but a lot of other things that could have been better. And you won't be able to do those things better if you go to folks and you tell them, oh, not only is your council member, you know, pushing something and your community board pushing something that you may feel removed from, but now the mayor is dictating from City Hall what planning is for the entire city. So they should, if, you know, like what they're presenting now, they should promote more as a comprehensive plan set by the mayor, as opposed to selling it as a comprehensive plan informed by communities. It doesn't seem like that. And I think we should speak to that point.
Thank you very much, Angel. So look, you know, we have a history of, you know, city agencies, in this, you know, case, city council, thrusting comprehensive planning before us with very short timeframes. In this particular instance, it doesn't appear that they are going to be deliberating on this immediately. However, there is a public hearing. I'm not at liberty to appoint anyone at the committee at this time without us getting, you know, our business together and quantifying a narrative to appoint someone to represent the committee or the board at any public hearing. However, I would ask you know, for a third of this committee to consider committing to at least participating at the public hearing in terms of a viewer, taking notes, and bringing it back to us committee for follow-up dialogue in March. Do we have 3 volunteers?
I'm just checking the calendar.
Y'all said the 22nd February, yeah?
23rd.
23rd, what time?
Well, it starts at 10 o'clock, but you know, it may be an all-day affair.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I can commit to being there and tuning in when needed. I know sometimes they cover multiple items throughout. Do they? No, I'm thinking of a
No, it'll just be this item that's being heard, but you know, sometimes these hearings go on for 7 or 8 hours, right?
I'm not asking you guys to go on for 8 hours of your day. I am asking for 3 volunteers to dedicate any portion of their day and try to bring back any relevant information that they could report back to this committee. So right now it sounds like I have Andrew as a volunteer. I have Jessica Elliott and our wonderful Vice Chair Elsie. And we might even get a 4th, which looks like Jessica Morris has raised her hand. So I want to commend you guys for volunteering outside a committee meeting to take some notes. Please be prepared to compile those notes by the end of this month so that we can review them internally and then be prepared to take a few minutes and report back in March. Angel, please earmark this in our agenda for March for an ongoing dialogue. In terms of the feedback that we got tonight, I probably won't be reviewing this entire Zoom meeting and taking notes word for word. We did ask Ivy to compile her data. She's going to send that to Angel. I've got some notes, so we'll review the minutes. However, there's some key points that were brought up tonight in this particular subject matter. George, you have a wonderful presentation. You had some key points at those slides at the end. That's like the nitty gritty. If you can make sure that that's shared with the committee.
Absolutely.
Andrew, Elsie and Jessica and others, you guys actually, you made some really heavy, solid points that we don't want to forget about after today. So just throw those in an email, send them while it's fresh in your mind, just like you sent your other emails tonight. And we'll throw it in a drive and we'll start the process of compiling quantifiable feedback. And we'll take it from there. Are there any other questions? Angel?
Not a question, an announcement if you're ready for those.
Yeah, let's move on to announcements. Yeah.
Yeah. I meant to say this earlier, but yeah, HPD informed me today that they're looking to schedule the public scoping hearing for the Las Raíces project at the end of March. They're looking at either the 30th or the 31st. Once I have the formal notification, I will of course circulate that to all of you. I just wanted to give you the heads up.
Okay, being that we have Mr. Cirillo here, would they be coming back in the very near future to give us an update, or will we be waiting until the public scoping is done?
We hadn't talked about rescheduling them, but if Chris is still on, he wants to speak to that, I can certainly give him the mic. The scoping session will be hosted by HPD. Chris, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I have to check in with HPD to talk to them about that. We were just discussing with them. It's the first that I've heard of specific dates for the scoping. We had been hearing from them possibly late March or early April. So now that it seems like they have 2 potential dates, I'll circle back with HPD and talk about getting back to the community board for further update. Because I think it was in the fall that we did the informational presentation?
Yeah.
So yeah, I will circle back and get back to Angel with an update on that.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much. Angel, for announcements, do we have any information on All Saints Church?
Other than the article that I shared with you today, no, that was the first I heard. I was actually clued in on that by the borough president's office.
Understood. Is there some outreach we can perform and queue it up as part of March's agenda for the land march portion?
Well, it's a landmark property, so that issue is already settled. It's a matter of who's buying it and what they want to do with it.
Yeah, I'm talking about the land march bucket in our protocol. So if we can just include that for a follow-up for March.
Sure.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, anyone else have anything? All right, thank you all. Wonderful meeting tonight. I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.